In this video, we're going to be comparing some tuned and untuned Weihrauch HW97k spring piston air rifles. We have got a couple of tuned examples that are used in competition, and we're going to be comparing those to an untuned standard 97 with standard internals. We'll be doing some accuracy tests out to 45 yards, and we'll also try them from different positions and with different stocks. And we'll finish up by looking at some of the different shooting characteristics of the different rifles. So recoil, lock time, movement, spring resonance, that sort of thing. So let's look at my rifle first. My 97 has got a Vortek PG2 kit fitted. Now technically this is not a tune, it's a drop-in kit, but it works really well. I bought this rifle brand new in 2016, and I shot it for about a year in HFT, just standard, to get used to it. And then I sent it off to Tony Burton, who fitted the Vortek kit. Now the Vortek kits have got a spring guide and piston sleeve, which cuts down spring resonance. These are fitted to the rear of the action, and then it's got a top hat which allows the spring to rotate, and the spring is open at both ends. It's not flattened off, so you get a very efficient spring. And the latest versions of these kits have got very nice stainless steel piston sleeves. Then a little while later I made a nice hamster for it, and I shot it in this configuration for quite a few years, and it was really good. But eventually I realised I needed a better stock, so I got custom stocks in Sheffield to make me a combination stock. So it's a CS1000 on the front and a CS600 at the back. So this gave me the fore-end depth that I worked out for my hamster, but it also gave me this Tyrolean cheek piece, and that enabled me to lock my head in. Get really good head position. So although my head isn't as far forward as it should be with a Tyrolean stock, it's very, very repeatable and nicely balanced on that front corner. For the accuracy test, we're just going to be shooting these little paper targets that have got a sticker, one of these shoot and see stickers, which is about 15mm across. I'm probably going to put my 40-yard aim point on it so that it will hit underneath and I won't destroy the aim point. So I'll put them out at 45 yards. I'm here at West London Rangers. They've kindly allowed me to video on the course after the competition's finished. So we'll do 5 shots at 45 yards with Helga. Right, action! Sorry, phone. Right there. There is a light breeze coming towards me from the left, so there's a slight left to right. I'd expect the group to be ever so slightly right. So there are two ways of shooting HFT. Up the peg and off the deck. Now I like to shoot up the peg. It's comfortable, I find it quite enjoyable, and it's versatile. So as long as you can do it in a repeated way, you can do that from any position really. So I'll try and hold it exactly the same way every time. I balance that corner of the hamster in the web of my left hand, so that's always in the same place. The butt pad is always in my shoulder. I have the butt pad quite high, and I'm not really holding it, it's sort of resting there, and my right hand isn't even gripping the pistol grip, just my thumb and my trigger finger activating the trigger. I find that very easy to repeat, especially having the hamster in exactly the same place, so you can go up the peg, down the peg, off the peg, you rest it on your fist. Yeah, nice repeatable hold. Obviously you've got to be in alignment and everything has got to be neutral. I'd say most important of all is a good bit of follow through. Now obviously if this was an HFT competition, I'd be approaching each of these shots separately, getting into position, getting my alignment sorted. I've got quite a repeatable shot routine. If you want to know any more about that, let me know in the comments and I can do a video on it. But yeah, it's generally quite repeatable. It's normally range and wind that are going to catch me out. So that was the only group I shot. I've got Scott and Ron from West London Rangers who witnessed that, and yeah, I wasn't going to shoot another one. So that will squeeze into a 15mm group and under a 5p. And considering the minimum kill size for 45 yards is 35mm, that group will give you a lot of wiggle room for wind and range error. So next, let's have a look at a standard HW97kt in 177. This is West London Rangers club gun. They bought it new, they haven't taken it apart, and I don't even think they've cleaned the barrel. They just put a scope on it and zeroed it in. So first thing I'm going to do to make this a fair comparison is give the barrel a clean and then make the trigger a tiny bit lighter. Take a selection of usual suspect pellets and do a very rough pellet test just to see if there's one that's obviously more accurate than the others. And sure enough, the best group is obviously JSB Express, which coincidentally is what Helga likes. So we'll do 5 shots at 45 yards with the standard HW97. I was very interested to see how this is because obviously I started with one of these guns, and over the years I've had my one tuned and I've got a better stock, but also I've become a better shooter at the same time. So I was very interested to see how I could shoot this. Already the stock feels a lot less comfortable. It's yeah, it's quite hard to get a decent position. So it definitely boings a lot more than mine does. It's quite noisy, the resonance of the spring, very noticeable. That's because although it does have a very basic spring guide, it doesn't have a piston sleeve or a top hat or a very, very good fitting spring guide. So the spring can boing around quite a lot. But as we're going to see later, that has got nothing to do with accuracy. Nice gun though, very solid, everything's really well made. Yeah, it's great. So I haven't made the trigger as light as my 97 because my competition rifle has got an extremely light trigger. This was maybe quarter of a turn, not a lot, just enough to make it serviceable. So from what I remember about shooting this when I first started, it was pretty good. The 45 yard shots though were always maybe 50-50, and then once I got it tuned they just started dropping all the time, so you can kind of see the difference in the group sizes. Really makes sense. So I guess this would be 25mm, and it's looking that way. Unfortunately for the last shot there is some left to right wind and it picks up for that very last shot. So if you look at that blade of grass above the image of the target, and just over my shoulders there's some ribbons, they all blow off to the right just before I pull the trigger. Fuck. Yeah, so that nicked that last shot. But I'm going to put that down to wind. So it fits in elevation wise to a 25mm group, so I'm going to call it that, or at least the potential of a 25mm group, which is pretty good. Now we're going to take a look at our second tuned 97. It's a Sandwell Field Sports Stage 2 tuned 97. It belongs to Dario and he's done very well with this rifle. It's the standard stock with a homemade hamster, and unlike me he shoots off the deck, which means he rests the butt of the rifle on the mat. His hand is just tucked under the front of the hamster and it's very, very stable. He doesn't have to support the rifle with his body at all, so it doesn't really move. So let's do 5 shots at 45 yards with a Sandwell Field Sports tuned 97. So anyone who knows Dario knows he's a very good shot with this rifle. He's won multiple competitions, and whenever he visits other clubs he usually causes a bit of a stir. He's a very good shot. I think he's always shot off the deck, and he's owned that rifle longer than I've had mine, so he knows it really, really well. I think he's putting his 50-yard aim point on the target, so he'll hit above it. So shooting off the deck really reduces hold sensitivity, I think. So a custom stock isn't that important. You know, it's only the butt and the hamster touching the ground, and I suppose as long as he gets a good head position, that's really all that matters. Also, you can be closer or further from the peg, that doesn't matter. As long as the butt and the hamster are touching in a similar way, that's your repeatability. Yeah, very stable position. As far as I'm aware, the Sandwell Field Sports Stage 2 tune consists of a trigger tune, which is polishing all the sears on the record trigger, and then on the action itself there's a very well fitted spring guide which is fixed to the trigger block of the gun, and then there's a spring that is custom fitted to that spring guide, so they're a really tight fit, and a custom fitted top hat. Now they don't have a piston sleeve, but they don't seem to need one. Everything is fitted together really nicely and they shoot really well. There's no spring buoying, minimal recoil, and they're very accurate. I know some very good shooters that use SFS tuned air rifles, and they seem quite loyal to them. I think they've got a good reputation. Dario certainly shoots very well with his. Now there's a slight right to left wind on the course when Dario's shooting. You can see he's starting to group to the left, and it picks up a little bit towards the end. We're not holding off for wind, so we're just aiming at the aim point. Very good group though. So the main group you can see is that cluster on the left, and I think the very last shot he takes, the wind drags it right over to the left, which is a shame, but we can see that it's wind. Now, although that looks like a big spread, it is in fact not very big at all, considering that's a 15mm target, and I think if you discounted the wind, that's easily within 15mm, and if you put it in a 35mm kill, if it was that windy and he just aimed inside right edge, they would all be inside the kill. Now for our next test, I bought my old 97 stock with a hamster, because I thought it'd be good that when Dario shoots the standard 97 with standard internals, he could do it in a stock that is the same as his tuned one. So we're going to do 5 shots at 45 yards off the deck with the standard 97 plus a hamster. This will be an interesting comparison, because this is basically the same position that he shoots his tuned rifle in, so it'll be a nice side-by-side test to see how it shoots. Now they have upgraded this since I shot it, and they've put a nice Hawk Vantage scope on it, so Dario is able to use the mil dots and get it so he can hit above the target. It's a bit of a windy day. I think it's going towards him, to be honest. Now something interesting happens on the next shot. Dario said he did exactly the same as he does on all the other shots, but it hits really high. And we think it might be because it doesn't have a top hat on the end of the spring. There's a chance the spring would bind inside the piston, and you might get a strange shot cycle where the spring is slightly twisted or behaving inconsistently between shots, because everything else is grouping very nicely. Now the disadvantage in shooting off the deck is it's not as versatile as shooting up the peg. So although it's more stable in a flat position, if you have to shoot an elevated target and you have to lift the front of the gun up, the angle that the butt is now going to dig into the mat means it won't slide back as easily, so that'll affect your recoil. Also, if there's a target down below you and you have to lift the butt up into your shoulder, or if you have to come up the peg completely because there's something in the way, your point of impact will probably be a little bit different. So that is a fantastic group. That main cluster is within 20 mil, so even with that flyer I'm going to average that out as 25 mil. So if we look at the results, unsurprisingly the two tuned 97s have got slightly smaller groups, but I would say the standard one does a lot better off the deck with a hamster. I think that hold sensitivity is more manageable when you're shooting it off the deck on flat ground. So yeah, very interesting experiment, and kind of what I thought. If you can get 15mm groups with the tuned 97s, then you should probably be able to get 25mm groups with the untuned 97s if they're shot well. This begs the question, why are the tuned guns more accurate? Or should I say easier to shoot accurately? So I'm going to look at some aspects of this. I'm going to look at movement, lock time, balance and spring noise and see how they differ. Now, one way we're going to look at this is through some high-speed footage. I was lucky enough to be given access to a high-speed film studio, and the owner very generously let me bring a load of air guns down and film them all at 2000 frames a second. What I wanted to test was how much the gun moves before the pellet exits the barrel. I brought the Club Untuned HW97 and I bought my Vortek HW97, and I wanted to compare them, make some measurements. Also, I got footage from a fine water bow sport spring showing the spring and piston in action, which is very useful for showing us how these things all work. So we all know how a spring piston airgun works. You compress the spring, pull the piston back, which draws air into a chamber, and then when you fire it, the spring expands and it compresses the air in that chamber and forces it through the transfer port and out of the barrel. When you transfer this to a high power spring rifle, there's quite a lot going on. There's a lot of dynamics, a lot of movement and a lot of forces involved. All of these can be measured. What some people have done, people who are far more technically gifted than I am, is use a thing called an accelerometer. This can measure all the different phases of the shot cycle and plot them in real time. So I've synchronized the barrel footage and the spring and piston footage of that fine water bow sport, and we can use that to illustrate what's going on within the shot cycle. So let's have a look. There's three main phases. There's first impact, which is here, there's pellet exit, which is here, and then there's second impact, which is here. So if we look at first impact, that is this point, and this is the point at which all of the air is compressed and it's built up pressure behind the pellet and it's about to shoot the pellet down the barrel. Then pellet exit is this point, so that's where the pellet has exited the barrel. It's also where the air is starting to bounce back on the piston. So the air that didn't go down the barrel is causing the piston to bounce back, which is called piston bounce. And then the second impact is the point at which that air then leaves the chamber and then the piston comes to rest at the end of the cylinder. That is second impact, and then all of this resonance is the spring bouncing backwards and forwards, cycling up and down, and that is the point in the shot cycle where you hear the spring go boing. You can change the way these different shot cycles behave by adjusting certain things in the gun. So for example, if you wanted to reduce piston bounce, which can cause felt recoil, you could open the transfer port, increase or reduce the piston weight, increase the spring preload or reduce the swept volume. All of these things will have an effect on the overall shooting of the gun, and getting these all to work in harmony for a particular specific gun, that's proper tuning. So continuing with our tuned untuned comparison, I want to look at rearward travel prior to the pellet exiting the barrel and see if there's much difference. So we'll start off with the Untuned 97, and I'm shooting it against a grid background, so we've got something to measure against. And from when it starts moving to when the pellet exits the barrel, it moves back by 1.5 squares and it moves up by half a square. And it's running 11 foot-pounds. And then my Vortek 97, which is also running at about 11 foot-pounds, that moves back by only 1 square and it moves up by half a square. So it's got 50% less rearward travel, which is very interesting, for the same power. The barrel flip is the same though, of half a square. Next I want to measure the lock time. So at 2000 frames a second, each frame is half a millisecond, and the footage freezes on every 5th frame for 1 frame. So we can count it. So we'll start off with the Untuned 97. So lock time really is the time between when the trigger is activated, when the sear is released, and when the pellet comes out of the barrel. And I'm interested to measure it actually. So counting the frames from when it starts moving to when the pellet comes out of the barrel, we have a lock time on the Untuned 97 of 20 frames, which is 10 milliseconds. Something else that we can compare when you're looking at these two rifles is the acceleration. So because we know that the Untuned 97 has got more rearward travel, if the lock time is the same, then it's probably going to accelerate more because it's got more distance to travel in the same lock time. And faster acceleration increases hold sensitivity apparently, so that might make some sense. And it's very similar, 19 frames, 9.5 milliseconds, so there's not much difference really in the lock times. Looking at the footage, I did notice that the Untuned 97 had more of an aggressive acceleration to the movement, and the tuned one had a softer acceleration, so that probably explains why it's less hold sensitive to some degree. And of the two guns, I would definitely say that the Untuned one has more felt recoil. It's travelling back a little bit further and it feels harsher, which is possibly due to the faster acceleration. Also the twang, which is after the pellet has left the barrel by the way, just adds to the feeling of the shot cycle being a bit harsh. The shot cycle on the Vortek 97 is much nicer though. Something else that can have a big effect on the felt recoil is the balance of the rifle. And if we look at the balance point on the two rifles, the standard thumbhole stocked rifle has got a balance point almost in the middle, whereas my custom stocked Vortek 97 has got a balance point much further forward, and it's actually on the corner of the hamster where I hold it, so I sort of hold it on the balance point. Apparently, the more further back your balance point is from how you're shooting it, the more barrel flip you get. And if you look at this standard 97, it moves around a lot more than mine does. This is going to be partly due to the mechanics of the gun, but it's also going to be due to the stock fit and the balance. The standard HW97kt has got an ambidextrous thumbhole stock. If you look at my head position from shot to shot, it changes. That's not good for parallax error and consistent shooting. Also my right hand is in slightly different positions every time, so that's not good for trigger control. My custom stock has got a very good dedicated cheek piece, and the rubber eyepiece on the scope, although it looks low, I am looking down the centre of the scope, that really helps to give me a repeatable head position. So if you look, my head or my eye position is pretty much the same for every shot. This is just another thing that increases repeatability and accuracy when you're shooting, so it all adds up. One of the main reasons people like to fit tuning kits or get their rifles tuned is to cut down on the spring noise, because no one likes a rifle that goes boing when you shoot it. That noise is, as we've seen, the spring resonating after the shot. And there's many different ways you can calm that down. But bear in mind that that is where the pellet has left the barrel, So the actual noise that you hear from the spring doesn't happen until after the pellet has started travelling towards a target. So it doesn't really make a difference to accuracy, although it does put people off when they're shooting, so it could help your shot routine. Most tuning kits will either have a spring guide or maybe a piston sleeve or a combination of the two, and these things will just help stop the spring from twanging and vibrating and resonating. This is the audio file for the two rifles. On the top is the standard HW97 and on the bottom is the one with the Vortek kit. So the standard 97 has got a slightly bigger sound profile and it drags on for a lot longer. On the Vortek kit it peters out pretty quick. And although it won't increase the accuracy necessarily, if your rifle has got a softer shot cycle, you might enjoy it more, be more relaxed and have a better shot routine. So that's it. I really enjoyed that. That was quite a journey. What have I learnt? Well, should you get your HW97k tuned, or should you fit a tuning kit? Yeah, why not? You should shoot it stock for a while just to get your technique down, but in the long run it will definitely improve the potential for accuracy. But it's not as simple as that. You've obviously got to look at the bigger picture. You've got to look at your stock, your technique, your shot routine. All these sorts of things are going to work together to give you a good result. It's not just about the gun. You've almost got to tune yourself. Yeah, very interesting. I'd like to say thank you to West London Rangers for lending me their club gun and letting me film on their course, and also to Dario. Thank you to John Budd for his technical advice. What I've really learnt from this is that the Weihrauch HW97 is a fantastic rifle. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more. See you on the next one. Bye.